Hello and welcome back to the Measure Pod. I'm Dara, joined as always by Matthew. Hey Matthew, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm looking forward to diving into more exciting news and a good topic. So we'll kick off with the news. So we've got a few bits to go through.
The first thing I had was a lot of people probably would have noticed things like Spotify and a few other big services going down last week on the 12th of June, I believe, which was all related to a Google Cloud outage because naughty Google didn't stick to their stringent policies of releasing and testing features. So from what I can see, there was some new feature they released that didn't go through the normal checks on their internal systems and had the right tags and flags on it. And it kind of propagated through all the various different regions and caused massive outages. So yeah, Google Cloud went down.
Bit of a rookie mistake, really. You wouldn't find us making mistakes like that, would you?
No, especially when the preach to us all the time about security and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, bit of a drop ball from Google there.
Do as we say, not as we do.
As far as I'm aware, yeah, as far as I'm aware, it's all back up and running. But just make sure you have backed up your data and have it sitting across multiple regions to deal with Google's problems when they drop the ball in this way. I think a couple of years ago, right smack bang around Black Friday, the US Central 1 region for App Engine went down, and everyone who Google had just been saying, move to server-side GTM, move to server-side GTM, they all lost. They had a big black hole in their Black Friday data because they were all on a single region in US Central 1 and it went down. So yeah, there are ways you can mitigate it by making sure you're not just reliant on one region, one zone in the cloud. But yeah, keep an eye on it anyway. My second piece of news. There's been a lot of, we found recently at Measure Lab, there's been loads of new Google scary sounding emails coming through about this new feature or that new feature around, you need to update your service accounts. You need to update your scheduled queries to be working on service accounts because of whatever, and they're a bit opaque and a bit difficult to sort of pick apart and understand what they're talking about. One of which came this week, which was about GA4 and BigQuery data transfer service. So essentially saying it just sounded a little bit like they were making changes, and then maybe you had to update some settings in the data transfer from GA4 to BigQuery. So essentially they'd released a load of new tables, but they released them into preview in the first instance. And then as they kept on working on them, they took them out of preview, tinkered with them in the background, and then they re-released these tables and fixed various bugs and stuff to general availability. So it may be that you've got like multiple tables or slightly different name tables and slightly different schemas within them. I think basically it's not going to affect, if you already had it set up, it'll just create new tables for the setup you previously had and fix the issues. If you've never set it up before, it's nothing. So it kind of seems like you can pretty much just carry on as is, but it might have sounded a bit alarmist and scary in the email when they sent that out earlier in the week.
They always do, don't they? It's always fairly like, it's always that kind of like red text, and I don't know if this was, but it's usually like big red bold text, and you need to take action. So actually, fine.
Yeah, action required. So nothing to worry about there.
Nothing too much to worry about. Is there anyone you think is there any kind of edge case where you would be caught out by that, or is it just not likely to be much of a problem?
I don't know, unless maybe you'd set up some sort of reporting on the existing tables, perhaps, and then they've created new tables and they're not going to be updated anymore. But apparently the original tables were a bit unusable. So like the landing page table, the landing page dimension was missing. So people aren't building reporting off of that useless table. But yeah, I suppose it's just worth just checking what's there, checking what's coming through with the new tables and making sure that you're not built reporting off it or something.
I mean, personally, I wouldn't expect to find the landing page dimension, landing page report. But that's just me.
No, that's just a combination of everything that makes a landing page report.
Never assume.
So they had an I/O the other week, I/O 25, which is like the software conference, I believe. And they announced Google Search AI, which I think has been in preview in some places for a while. And this is different from the summary text that pretty much everyone will see at the top of every Google search. This is a completely standalone, independent search function, and Google started to, I think, push people there by default in many cases. So we're using this AI search feature for Google, and it's like longer. It's better for longer form questions and longer form answers, and it kind of feels like a bit of a merging of the chat interface of Gemini and the search interface of Google kind of being melded into one.
Because I'm trying, the way you said there,
really
like it's kind of a blending of the Gemini interface and search. Is like, I'm trying to kind of jump ahead and see where, like, at some point they're going to become the same, aren't they? And it's like, how are they, what's the plan there? Is it just going to be that at some point you'll just be actually using Gemini without realizing it? Or is there
it's got to be Google's
for the two to still be separate? Because Gemini now is like all the LLMs, they're all pulling in like live internet results as well, aren't they? So they kind of just trying to see where the is there going to be a distinction in 6 months or a year's time, or would it just all be the one?
Maybe. I mean, it's definitely the strongest muscle Google can flex, because they obviously, I suppose people like OpenAI starting to insert search into their chat interface was starting to eat Google's dinner a little bit, and just the very fact that people were asking OpenAI questions full stop was eating Google's dinner a bit. So this is probably some hope of clawing back some of that search that is starting to leak away to these other platforms. But yeah, I don't know. I don't. It's so hard to tell what this new interface is, and there's going to be a lot of site owners and stuff out there that's saying to Google, "Well, you're just taking further eyes off our site and just surfacing more of the information in your own site." I suppose to a certain extent that's a problem for Google's
their
model.
advertising, because I assume that there's no ads in any of the Gemini any aspect of the Gemini interface at the moment.
Not currently.
So yeah,
we feel it's coming. It feels like
it has to be.
One of them's going to shift. OpenAI, Anthropic, Google are going to start to get adverts in responses, and that's going to be the way to monetize it.
Yeah.
As depressing as that is,
I think we might have like raised in a previous episode we might have like raised the topic of LLM optimization, like SEO for ChatGPT, basically. It's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out in terms of like how do you actually both organically and if there is some kind of paid model in the future, that's going to be quite disruptive. You're going to have to completely shift your focus from optimizing for, I was going to say web, it is still web, but for an LLM interface rather than through a standard search engine.
Yeah, because I think what we said on that last call, it was Shopify and OpenAI, and
that's right.
I keep calling these calls podcast. It was Shopify and OpenAI, and we were a bit unclear. Like, does that mean, how does that work? Is Shopify going to be in OpenAI, or? And I think looking at it since, like, you can do the full sort of shopping journey in theory whenever this comes out within OpenAI. So then it is like you're completely abstracting away. I suppose you're selling a product, but at the same time, it's hard to understand who is buying that product. But maybe it actually gives you more information than you could ever possibly think of, because everyone's put their hopes and dreams into the chat interface of OpenAI, and they've got so much dirt on them that you can send that back to your people that are buying, and they can target you because you got holes in your socks, something like
exactly, that. Yeah. If that's the worst thing they know about me, I'll be quite happy.
Yeah, I need to stop using underwear related examples. I think last time it was buying underpants, and now it's holes in socks.
Listen, you're just using your own buying behavior as examples.
These are my problems. Yeah. So it's and Google did talk about a shopping feature as well, where they had it's almost like an assistant that you can say built into Chrome browser and on your Android devices, where you can set up price alerts, and it will tell you when things are at a certain price point, and then you can just sort of one click buy, and it'll go off and do all that stuff. So it's again another layer on top of that shopping journey. But there you go. Interesting times.
Brave new world.
Some Measure Lab news. I haven't done any Measure Lab news before. Well, we probably have, but we went to the Hack the Future event at Google last week, which was really, really fun. So myself and the guys in my team, so Victor, Katie, and Prasanna, we all went together, and it was this loads of different teams from loads of different cloud partners around the world and around Europe. I think there was sort of 110 teams or so, all competing on completing these various tasks on Google Cloud and working with AI and analytics and data and deployment. So it's a really, really cool, stretchy kind of event, and prizes for the top one, which we didn't win the entire thing, but we did come 18th out of 109. So I'm calling that a respectable place.
So you didn't win.
We made friends along the way, and that's winning.
Now 18 is amazing. That's really, really good. And last but not least, on the news front, we've got a little bit of a plug, which we don't do too often, but we've got an upcoming webinar that we wanted to promote for our listeners who might be very interested in this. So if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by the flood of Martech tools out there, I mean, who isn't? Let's be honest. But we're going to be cutting through the clutter, and by we I mean actually Matthew. So you'll be part of this webinar. We're going to have a live session on Thursday, the 3rd of July at 1 p.m. That's UK time. So Matthew, do you want to give just a little overview of what we're going to be covering in the webinar?
Yeah, so we kind of like you say, we talk about the Martech stack and how ridiculously large that has become, and just sort of the various issues that come with having that many different platforms, that many different products, all claiming to have very similar or close and overlapping problems and solutions, and the fact that with a lot of these things, you also get a load of solutions looking for problems, and you pay for that. So we talk a little bit about that, a little bit about how cloud computing in our world, like Google Cloud, offers a lot of different services and tools to be able to build this stuff out in a bit more of a composable way without having to lean on this plethora of SaaS products that are out there. And we talk about a couple of case studies that we've built for our clients at Measure Lab, and how, what would have been the off-the-shelf version, and how we handled it with Google Cloud, and what that difference that made to price and agility and all those good things. So it's going to be me, myself, and Irene. No, me and Mark Rochefort, Dara's co-founder, double act, partner in crime, on the 3rd of July.
We'll drop a sign-up link in the show notes. So do make sure if you're interested, you sign up. It's free to attend, and feel free to share the link with people in your team as well, anyone who you think might be interested. But again, it's Thursday, the 3rd of July, 1 p.m. UK time. All right, that's it for the news for this week. Our guest on the show today is István from Mitzu. He's one of the founders. Mitzu is a warehouse native product analytics platform. So we have a really interesting chat with István, including the origin of the name, if you're interested in that, and the logo. So do stick with the full episode to get the answers on that. But we covered things such as, I don't want to give too much away, but we cover things like, who would need this approach, and what does it offer, and who it might be suitable for, what are some of the obstacles. But it was an interesting chat.
It was a really interesting conversation, particularly as, we've been talking a lot recently about how you get your data into data warehouses and get it into a good shape and all those good things. And this is an addendum to that, a reward you get for having your data sitting in a data warehouse in good shape and good structure. So really interesting conversation.
Okay, enjoy. Okay, a very warm welcome to the Measure Pod, István. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here.
So we always, when we've got a guest, we always get them to do the job of introducing themselves, because it tends to go a little bit better than if I tried to do a very bad intro and then you'd correct me on all the things I got wrong. So can you, in as much or as little detail as you want, really, can you just give our listeners a bit about your background, how you got started and what led you to where you are today and what you're doing in your current role?
Yes, it's a pleasure. So I'm currently the CEO and founder of Mitzu, which is a warehouse native product analytics platform, one of the few warehouse native product analytics platforms. But originally I had the luck to be in multiple roles. I was a data engineer in a few companies. I was a product analyst in a few companies, and I have been also a software engineer for quite a while, like backend and frontend as well. So I got the full package in my history. And basically this gave me like the opportunity to kind of start a company. And that's what I'm doing now, essentially, for the last 2 years.
So I'm guessing in some of those roles you learned what not to do, and that's what you've taken into. It's often the best experience, isn't it? When you've actually, been on that side of things, when you've been a product analyst, or you've been an engineer, you kind of learn maybe what doesn't tend to go right, and it kind of gives you good insight into what to do when you're building a platform.
Yes, definitely. It's been a long journey. I did mostly work in e-commerce and travel companies. I would categorize them as B2C. And the number one thing that was kind of felt across all these experiences that if you have too much data, traditional solutions might break down, and you need to be clever to overcome the issues with too much data. And essentially, that's what led me to start this whole business.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about Mitzu and what that does?
I think the easiest way to describe to the audience, if they are familiar with these tools, is that it is a tool that we built like Amplitude or Mixpanel, but it is warehouse native. The warehouse native aspect means that we don't copy the data from the data warehouse. We let the client, the customer, store all their data themselves in their data lake or data warehouse. And we just automatically generate SQL queries on top of the data warehouse and execute them and get the results and show like a funnel or retention analytics chart in the tool. So maybe even like shorter summary, it is like Amplitude or Mixpanel, but it writes SQL on top of your own data.
And what were the reasons that led you to that starting a company in that space? What kind of pain points were you seeing in the industry that made you think, right, let's move away from this middleware layer of data storage to native warehouse analytics?
Yes. So it's quite a long story. As I mentioned, I was working mostly for travel industry, e-commerce, B2C SaaS companies, and the recurring pattern was that at one point in the life cycle of the company, you reach like a volume of data that you have collected. And let's say you send that volume of data to Amplitude, and basically the whole thing becomes unsustainable. Either the economics of it, just collecting the data to Amplitude is becoming more and more expensive. Also, you need, after a while in a company, after let's say a seed or Series A startup, should or typically does collect it to the data warehouse as well. And basically having your data in two places and having that massive amount of data in two or even more places is just not feasible. And during my work, it was a continuous struggle to manage the synchronization between tools. Basically, this is what led me to basically start like a Mitzu, first as a hobby project, side project on the weekends. Then it became open source, and then it's now venture funded startup.
And I never really thought about that in terms of because you're going to have a whole data storage layer that you're going to have to pay your amplitudes, etc., that you are, I suppose, swerving around in not having to store the data for them.
Yes, exactly. So in very short, it totally makes sense to have third-party analytics and third-party customer engagement tools and all these type of third-party tools for marketing, your analytics and everything up until a scale. And at one point, it just starts to break down. Either it is way too expensive to maintain it, or it's impossible to maintain it. And this is basically, we mostly see that some companies hit that level that it is impossible to maintain data in sync in multiple tools. And the natural answer to that is, let's centralize everything to a data lake or data warehouse, and let's just connect the tools to it. And let's let the tools take care of like queries and everything, but let's not copy all the data just because of some use case that the company has.
So what, just to, well, I don't know that this is going back a step or not, but just to ask a question around what happens below that threshold. So why would why would it not make sense for a company to use warehouse native platform? If they're below that size threshold.
It's a great question. Based on my experience, it is very, very hard to, or it's easier, but traditionally it's hard to get started with data warehousing. You need to have an expertise, a team of data engineers, analysts in place. You need to hire them. It takes a lot of time. These traditional tools, let's go back to Amplitude. Actually, just to be fair, I really like Amplitude as a tool. It's a great inspiration. I nothing against them. We are not even. I would say we are not even in the same market. We are not competing for the same companies. But anyway, back to your question. It's to get started. It's very hard, and companies fall back to this. Simple to install. You put an SDK to your code. You collect your data, and everything's just out of the blue works. It's much easier to get started with these tools in an early phase of a startup than, let's say, with data warehousing. I would argue this was actually even more true before 2020. In the recent years, the data warehousing and even CDPs started to focus on moving the data to data warehouse and make it as easy as possible. So I would argue if a good data engineer or a good engineering team knows about what are the tools that you can use for moving the data to the data warehouse, is the same challenge, the same type of challenge to move to the data warehouse as it would be moving to these external tools. It's just not yet well understood.
And I suppose you've got that advantage. So we're Google Cloud partners at Measure Lab, and certainly that rings true to us that you've seen a lot of new sort of accessibility and democratization tools, like the growth of the data transfer service. Me and Dara did a podcast on Next 25 a couple of weeks ago that was all BigQuery, everything BigQuery. It seems like they're really trying to centralize so many services in that platform. So I suppose for yourself, that's quite gratifying and confirmatory of like, well, everyone's putting their eggs in this data warehouse basket, and that fits nicely with what we're trying to do.
Yes, BigQuery especially, I think they are in a very good position. Their pricing model is amazing. It's very appealing for startups. They have a free tier, up to 1 terabyte. Then there is like $6 per terabyte of data scan. Super, super good pricing. And the tooling as well is getting better and better with Looker and all these things around. GA4 data now, it's like 1 click to move to BigQuery. So everybody is essentially set up to have a data warehouse, I would say, if you're in a Google Cloud.
Like you say, years ago when it was a little less accessible to get your data into the cloud data warehouse, potentially the clear thing is to go down some off-the-shelf ETL tool. But now, with that pricing tier, if you're a startup or a small company and the accessibility to get the data into the warehouse, and basically, for a lot of our clients, in the first forays into the warehouse world, it's free. You got free connected to GA4. It's getting more and more appetizing to do a composable approach to centralizing warehouse data. Because that's going to be, and you can see a lot of these off-the-shelf tools scrambling to find their new reality, like Fivetran buying Census and a few other things, trying to consolidate and get new features.
Also, the tooling, I think Amplitude is also moving to this warehouse native direction slowly. They are building on Snowflake still, but I assume they will also try to do other data warehouses. A/B testing tools like Epo, that was recently acquired by Datadog, they also had a warehouse native approach to A/B test analytics. It is slowly getting to the data world, this warehouse native approach. It's still not exactly where I wish it would be. But it is more and more appealing for everybody.
Why do you think that's been slower? Why do you think it's been slower on the data side?
Good question. To be honest, it is my full honest answer to this. For businesses to be data warehouse native, it is often cannibalizing their existing business model. That's how I would say probably the biggest reason is. Imagine like yourself as Amplitude, you are connecting to a data warehouse, some customer, and how are you going to monetize that? Currently, their monetization strategy is volume-based, and suddenly they need to switch to something else, either a seat-based, license-based monetization, or like a fixed price, or they can keep with the volume-based pricing, but it is very hard to justify for the customer why I need to pay X hundred thousands of dollars amount for the data that I already pay for in Snowflake. So it's that, I would say, in short, for the existing incumbent businesses, it is a feature that they use to keep their old clients, and it's not a product itself that they think of. So this is my short and honest answer. For
Yeah,
this.
makes sense.
Out of interest, how do you see? So, say just to step back slightly to the idea of it getting more and more accessible for people to centralize data in data warehouses. There's also this very popular term at the minute. It's not a new one, but this whole shift left, and the idea that these sort of federated data teams within a company own everything. So that, say, like you have your, to speak in Measure Labs cadence, your marketing analytics team who own their own models and almost their own mini marketing data warehouse. Do you see that trend happening more and more within your industry, where there's less one big Goliath with the keys in the center, and everyone's just trying to chip away a bit off the edge, where they're kind of getting ownership?
I would say we see that, but it is really dependent on the company itself. How is it set up, the organization, the capacity in like the data team or teams. Currently we mostly see companies that have a few people in data in any business that we work with, and there I think it's still like a one centralized team and dealing with all the data, which has some benefits and also some disadvantages. Definitely, it's always a debate, like if you should centralize and have somebody that is taking care of everything, or distribute the responsibilities, but you might end up in like multiple times implementing the same thing essentially, or even worse, some contradicting information in multiple these let's say these sub data warehouses. Yeah, so in my experience with our current customers we have, it is mostly small data teams that we work with.
Yep. Yeah, it almost feels like there's a combination of the two models, doesn't it? Where you've got some centralized ownership and to stop the repeated data and the multiple answers to the same question, but also some sense of autonomy for the smaller teams. Because it does feel as well that the pace with which things are changing and new things are coming online, and the AI features that, say, Google are chucking out into BigQuery and stuff like that, for people to take advantage of them and really grab hold of them, they're going to need data in which to do that with. And if it's all slowed down by bureaucracy and red tape, that's going to be tricky for companies to keep pace.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So can I ask, what, mostly out of my own curiosity, but I think there'll be listeners probably who will be in a similar position where they get it, they get the benefits, and I appreciate what you said earlier, but there may be being a point of scale where this suddenly becomes almost like a no-brainer, or at least something you should really consider. What's then involved? So let's say you work in a data team, you pitch to the business to say, right, we're at that size now, we've got enough data, let's move to a warehouse native solution. Even on a high level, what's involved? What does that process look like? What skills are needed internally? How do you go about implementing that solution? How do you then go about educating the wider business around how to make use of that? What does that kind of look like typically?
It's a great question. I would separate these to two type of companies again. One that already has an existing solution. Let's keep talking about Amplitude. If they decide to, we need to get rid of Amplitude because the scale we are operating is impossible to maintain anymore with Amplitude. The biggest challenge is that most of the users of that product analytics platform are really, really like embedded into the platform. So they have their charts, their dashboards, and everything. It's a tremendous work to get away from that platform. So there is some kind of vendor lock-in, which is obviously it's coming with every tool like that. That's one part. For this group of companies that already have the tooling ready, and also they have a data warehouse, From the technical point of view, to have a warehouse native approach to it, there is not really much to do in the data warehouse. There is no need for extra data modeling or sometimes transformations or preparation of the data. The reason why, because they already have a BI tool, such as, let's say, Power BI or like Looker or Tableau. They already need the data to be cleaned and performant enough. Even with Amplitude, they already had to do the effort to make it well optimized, and the data to be essentially clean and usable. So there is not much here that the team must do to switch to a warehouse native approach. It's more likely to one by one shift the thinking of the people that from now on you will use this different tool, although it looks very similar. Your charts are going to be gone, your dashboards are gone. The buttons are slightly mixed up, but you have to use that from now because it makes sense. Everything else what was there before, it doesn't make sense anymore. So that's the shift in the organization is the hardest part for companies that already have the solution. For companies that don't have a solution, there is like surprising a lot of them actually. Their problem is a bit different, but it is also very similar. The product managers, or we also serve marketing people, they don't know these tools. They haven't seen most likely Amplitude, Mixpanel, all these product analytics tools. So they needed to be educated. So from now on, instead of you asking the data team for some basic query to one of your questions must be answered, instead of the data team answering you in 2 days, you have this tool that you can use and answer for yourself. That's a lot of education. So it's still a problem. It's not easier than the other one actually. Again, technology-wise, like data platform, data modeling, transformations, if you have a data warehouse and you're not starting out, you most likely have already made the necessary steps to make it performant and clean and everything and usable. So at least for us, we don't require the company to do extra steps.
Well, it might be a good segue, I suppose, there, just to talk a little bit about the technology of what it is you're doing. So the reason I think that, so obviously you've got basic model data, and you're confident that your system can talk to that data and pull out meaningful insights. So how exactly is that layer working? I know you can't give us your secret sauce, but how is that layer working? And
there is no secret, actually. It's I'm happy to talk about how it works. Maybe let's start with the integration process, how we do integration to data warehousing, to data warehouses. The goal of this integration is the data team connects their tables from the data warehouse, from, let's say, BigQuery, multiple tables or a single table, doesn't matter. It can be even, sometimes we have customers that have like 1,000 tables connected to a workspace in Mitzu. The integration's goal is to kind of collect metadata from those tables, first of all. And by metadata, we mean in product analytics, the whole thing is based on events and properties, and then you have user properties. And in the data warehouse, traditionally, you have tables and schemas. So you need to have a transformation in the tool that transforms those tables into meaningful events and properties and all that stuff that is already familiar with for the users. For us, this is called the indexing process. You can imagine it as like you connect your 1,000 tables in Mitzu, you press a button, and what we do is kind of go to the table, read out the schema, the column names, the everything that is like kind of metadata from the table. We get also a small sample of it, like very tiny sample, just to see a couple of extra information. What could be the potential filter values for properties, etc. Things like that. And this indexing usually takes, depending on the company and the data models they have, from like 1 minute to half an hour. And once that is done, you got the events and properties and user properties type of setup like you are familiar with in any traditional product analytics. And if you have that, you can start using the application, build your funnels, build your retention queries, and it will translate that into SQL queries. And the secret sauce is that we are doing it in an automatic way that is generating highly efficient SQL queries. I can give you an example. Let's say a funnel query. You want to measure page visit to checkout in an e-commerce company. What is the conversion rate during like the last month? How many people do checkout from the visitors? How a data analyst would approach this with SQL is doing kind of left join and some filtering. And this is okay. This is easy to write for a data analyst, but it's very, very suboptimal in performance. So for example, what we do is a lot of magic with window functions and kind of unioning tables instead of joining them, which will result in a much better CPU complexity or like time complexity of the queries. And essentially, your experience with the tool is very similar to what you have with Amplitude and Mixpanel.
And is that a combination of knowledge of common data sets that most of your customers within particular sectors are going to be coming at you with, like GA4, the schema, Google Ads, etc. Is that coupled with AI? Like, is LLM helping generate any of that SQL, or is it all the knowledge of those schemas and being able to put together these good, efficient window functions and knowing how to join them together into queries?
Yes, it's a great question. Yeah, we don't use LLM. This can be a systematic. This approach is systematic. So if you do the same clicks in the application, it will produce the same SQL all the time. And I have a strong belief that this part itself, it's not ideal for LLMs because it's kind of obvious what you need to do. There is a few things you have to consider when you look at the tables. You get the metadata from tables. You get information such as like what is the date partition column, for GA4, for example. You get information what is the event type or event name column. You get it from the metadata. And based on that metadata collection and the information we have, we can kind of systematically generate very, very efficient queries without the use of LLMs. With that said, I'm really a big fan of LLMs and AI, and I think there is a lot of role in this for them, for product analytics, but not exactly the SQL queries generation. I think there's many companies trying with text to SQL approaches, which makes a lot of sense when it's a small amount of data. At our scales that we operate, these high volume data sets that we operate with, I think there will be quite so many problems with LLMs, just text to SQL approach.
We have alluded to that a little bit over the past sort of few weeks, where off the back, I suppose, of Google's big announcements of a lot of LLM stuff going into BigQuery and some text to SQL type approaches, that if you didn't have your ducks in a row from a data perspective in your warehouse, it could lead to some expensive problems potentially, because it can be quite autonomous in what it does and just sort of go off and start doing things. Which is why I asked the AI question, because I wasn't completely sure how you were doing it, but that's interesting that it's just deep knowledge and smart putting things together and functions, etc.
To be honest, there's not much secret sauce in this. We identified like 10 cases and how companies, store their data. And if they don't do it that way, as our covered models, it is either going to be extremely slow for them anyway. Even like a data analyst query would be very, very slow for them. So it's very beneficial for them to model it in a way that it's fast in our tool as well. So yeah, there is not that many things that we have to be smart about.
Would the idea with the kind of optimized SQL queries and being able to do these things in a kind of more automated and streamlined way, the kind of like on the surface level, you think, well, that's got a real advantage to the company because then it can make these tools more accessible to people who don't have SQL skills. Do you maybe you'll have to speculate a bit on this, but from the customers that you work with or the people that you know who are using, even if it's not necessarily Mitzu, but just some warehouse native solution, being skeptical, I kind of imagine the reality would be that it actually makes the life easier for the analysts, but not because people start using these tools themselves, but just because they can save themselves having to do SQL coding every single time they get a request. But it's that classic thing, isn't it, of like sometimes people just want to go to the person who's got analyst in their job title because they feel they'll trust the answer more than, don't give me the power to do it because then I have to trust myself. So I could imagine maybe the benefits are still there, but they might not always, there's this kind of ideal view, isn't it, that it becomes this like, everybody's using the creating their own reports, everybody's making their own queries, but I suspect that probably doesn't happen that often.
You're right. Yeah, exactly right. It's again coming back to the two type of companies. One is familiar with product analytics tooling, and the other one is not. If the other, the one that doesn't know, the product managers don't know product analytics tools, and they used to be talking to the data team, asking for answers, it's going to be the same thing. They are going to still go to the data team and asking for answers, but it's going to be much faster. The answer will be much faster given. That's the big difference. We had some success on educating people. It takes a lot of time.
It's a big undertaking, isn't it?
Yes. And the other thing is, like, if you are coming of like the world of Amplitude and Mixpanel or like GA, and you know what these tools are capable of, and you are just given a slightly different tool to you'll figure it out as a product manager. You'll start using it. So it's more like a cultural question or like an organizational question. But definitely we had much bigger success in onboarding new users when they already knew a tool like that.
I had a question which is a little bit more, I suppose you still have similar problems to, say, a company that's doing text to SQL, in that your output is only ever going to be as good as that data that is sitting in the warehouse for the customer. If they haven't done their, I know you said that most of your customers are coming at you either with an established warehouse, so they've got some modeling, they've got some reporting tables, but if there's other things further to the left of that, from the point of collection and getting all of that data right, so that what's being produced in your platform doesn't look right but isn't right. Do you do much in terms of helping clients understand that side of things to make sure that the data is solid before it gets ingested by your platform?
Yeah, I mean, in short, yes. We help out our clients. We help, like, they understand if there is an anomaly. They are not, they cannot explain with some release or something. We help them sometimes even debug on a raw level data layer. We help them debug this. I think this problem is not related to Mitzu in general. It's related to like data collection and how do you manage data. The one positive part of this, why I think we shine in this data quality, is that it's not a black box that we built. Every SQL query that we generate is visible to you. You can review it. You can copy paste it to your BI tool if you want. And so we are taking away that uncertainty, or like let's say source of risk, where you are moving your data one more step to the right, let's say, to an external solution like third-party analytics tools. So your data can fail in collection time, your storage time, something can go wrong. Data modeling time, you can have some problems, and it can also have issues when you are moving it away to a third-party tool. So with this, at least you're getting one less place of a potential risk of your data being corrupted.
Yeah, I guess my point, not that it was Mitsu's responsibility, more that you're going to get, anybody's going to get more out of your tool if they've done their due diligence on, like you say, from point of collection to transport to modeling. Once they've done all that and they've done it properly, and maybe they, like you say, they grow their team internally to do that in some way, they engage with an external party to do the fundamentals in that way, they're really going to get a lot of benefit from your tool once that fundamental foundation's in place.
Yeah, again, like the worst thing that can happen is, like, in one of your tools you see some numbers and the other tool shows completely different numbers for supposedly the same source, and at least that is taken out of the equation, that problem.
What about so a lot of the talk so far, and I know this is kind of how you position Mitzu as a product analytics platform. How does marketing analytics fit into this? Because I know but I'll probably get this the wrong way around, but I think I'm right in saying one of them recently added marketing analytics and maybe the other one had it before. And but it's like, I guess the question is like, should they both sit under one? Should they be using one tool, or should they be separate, or is it going to be a case by case basis?
Oh yeah, it's a it's a good one. I think the use cases are somewhat overlapping for product and market analytics. At least what we see, we have both from the customer base. We have both. Like some only use it for product, some use it for marketing only, some use it for both. Also, it depends on the industry. I would say, like traditionally e-commerce, travel industry, companies that don't require your user to be signed in, to be using the application. I think it's product and marketing is like roughly the same thing in the data, at least in this use cases, from the use cases point of view. Let's stick to like e-commerce. What you want to maximize is the number of visitors on your site, and you maximize your conversion rate on the website. And conversion rate is a funnel analytics problem. And the same thing, you can have it in product. If you want to see how many people convert to a new feature in the mobile app or something, it's the same. For us, it's the same SQL query. There's no difference. There can be some difference in the underlying data for marketing and product. Or like, for example, in marketing data, you most likely don't have people that are authenticated. You most likely have like a visitor ID only, or like an unauthenticated ID. While in product, you are capable of seeing people that are recurringly coming back to your product. You are capable of measuring retention, or at least easier to measure retention to your product, because everybody must sign in. And that's different. But fundamentally, the tool itself, I don't think it should look different. It's the features in the tool should look very similar.
And then I kind of agree with you on that. But then I wonder, do you see this pattern where in some cases somebody might still use a tool like GA4 because of the integrations that offers with the other, with the Google ads and the DMP and all the rest of it. So is that, you're not going to assume it is something you see where people would still use GA4 maybe for those native connections?
Oh yes, definitely, yeah. It's I think GA4, at least because of the ecosystem, is very useful around it. It's as you mentioned, Google Ads is great. Tag Manager, everything it's kind of well fitting together. On the other hand, we also see people exporting their GA4 data to BigQuery, doing a little bit of transformation, removing the repeated types, which is like an annoying thing in the GA4 data, and transferring that to JSON. And basically after that, you are good to go to do product like marketing analytics on it. Yeah, so that's definitely. I mean, these warehouse native tools, they don't replace everything. Obviously, you will have your dedicated tools. I think GA4 is very good to it very well fits into this Google ecosystem. While our tool or other warehouse native tools, they are most likely a read-only type of tool. Like you pull information out of the data warehouse, you don't get like extra features beyond that.
So we mentioned earlier in the podcast about since 2020, BigQuery and other data warehouse platforms have started to level up their games a little bit and make some of this data warehouse analytics more plausible. What have they done? What have they changed since 2020 that's really leveled them up and made them in this way?
I think the answer is kind of like it is. There is so many open source solutions coming out, like Iceberg and Delta tables that enables this, and all the other players like BigQuery and Snowflake must act on them because they were lagging behind. They were like slower than Databricks, significantly slower than Databricks, and now it's such a big competition in this warehousing space to be performant, and cost effective, that essentially it has been a revolution in the last couple of years.
I'm possibly being naive here as the least technical of the three of us. But what would stop and maybe this is something that keeps you up at night, but what would stop Google taking Google with BigQuery, but obviously it could be another data warehouse vendor, whatever. What would stop them from? Do you think they have an appetite to actually get into this space, given that they are the ones actually storing the data? Do you think that they would be interested in actually adding this layer on top, or is that just not that's just not their that's not their area of interest?
There is a lot of potential candidates that could implement this, like any BI tool, Looker, or like Power BI. Data warehouse solutions like let's say BigQuery, also they could do that. I think the answer comes down to how well it fits to their current vision of the product, and how I see it. Let's say BigQuery and let's say Looker, they want to stay as a generic solution for a wide audience. And this product analytics is for like product managers, and if you squint, it's for marketing managers as well. This is like a small subset of everything they could do. So the question would be like, I would rephrase the question like, why do they don't do all type of verticals? And it suddenly becomes a different question, but it is the answer for it, because why would you just pick this one and not do all the other verticals? Let's say, why don't you cover I don't know, energy sector, the finance sector with verticalized tools? It is very, very hard to build a team to do this, to build this. Me personally, I started to work on this years ago. There is a lot of expertise coming with it and a lot of experience. And we are a small team, but we are laser focused on this problem, this 1 or 2 people, personas that use the application. I would say, jokes aside, Google would be much better off buying us out,
of course,
than finding their own team.
Yeah.
I'm making
like which of course is often what they do. So yeah, it is. Yeah. One other area, and then I think Matthew probably had a couple of extra questions as well. But one final area for me that we haven't really kind of gone into is around kind of data privacy. And I guess that's one of the, I'm going to state the obvious, but that's a big advantage in somebody if they did go down the warehouse native route, is again, you're keeping all that, the customer's data is staying in one place rather than pumping it off into, God knows where. So that must be a growing trend that would obviously benefit companies like Mitzu. But from a company perspective, you're reducing the number of places where something could go wrong in terms of data privacy.
Yes, definitely. It's we hear that from customers. A couple of industries are typical for this: fintech, edtech, B2B SaaS as well. When you have like your customers are mostly dealing with businesses, and their customers essentially they require them to keep the data safe. It is very often actually the motivation to move to warehouse native solutions. Actually, surprisingly, I was expecting it less, but in the US, it is as much as a concern as in, let's say, Europe. So we have this from a couple of customers in the US. Basically, they got lawsuits because their data was, corrupted. It's easy to get burnt, by this, if you are, for example, in the edtech industry. So yeah, it's a growing concern. I would even probably risk to say that with the current political situation happening in the world, it's going to grow even further. But definitely it's already there. It was already there for us before before the current climate started. Yeah.
I've got 2 remaining questions. I'm going to ask them both at the same time and let you decide in which order you want to tackle them. The first question is around the branding of Mitzu in this sort of Hello Kitty-esque sort of little cat. I'm really interested in what led to that, and maybe even the name of the company as well. And the second was more of a bit of a crystal ball gaze. You mentioned that you were very interested in AI and LLMs and all that stuff. It doesn't have to be about AI and LLMs, but just where do you see things progressing? What do you see the next sort of 5 years being within product analytics, marketing analytics, and the world of tech generally? So take them however you wish.
I'll start with the easier one with the cat. So I mentioned like it started out as a hobby project. I'm working on it alone, and it became like an open source project. It was an open source project for a while actually. And initially, the open source nature of it was an idea for like marketing. I wanted to acquire leads, potential customers through the developer community or data engineering community that are traditionally going for open source tools, with the hope that they will turn into paying customers. And naturally, if you are going for like the individual contributors, let's say data engineers, data analysts, you must appeal to them like as a friendly tool, essentially like it welcomes you. You can play with it. It's like a cat. You can play with it. It's like that was the idea behind it, behind the logo. We switched from open source to like SaaS business, but we kept the logo, which was an advice from one of the designers we have. Basically, even if you are doing B2B sales, we do enterprise B2B sales often, like sales cycles of half a year. The brand, it's required still. You are talking to humans, you're talking to people, and they will remember the cat. They won't remember like an abstract whatever logo, And they often they talk to each other. This is what we hear back that, you remember this cat tool? What was the name of the tool? What was this cat? So it kept inside.
I like everything else in the space feels very utilitarian. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It does differentiate it as a brand for sure.
Yes. So by the way, there is a security company called Vanta. Again, super B2B enterprise salesy. Like it cannot be worse than that. And they have a logo for llama, and it's the same story. That's what actually was the motivation as well. Like it's the same story. You are still selling to humans, and you want to be in their mind. By the name Mitzu, it's a name of a cat in my native tongue, which is Hungarian. So it's just like that. And the original, I had a partner in the beginning. We were sitting in a cafe called Mitzi. And we were like brainstorming the name of the company and everything. And like after 1 hour, we said like, okay, let's just call it Mitzu and have this cat logo. And it's stuck. And I think it's too late to change it. So we might upgrade it to a tiger if we go up market.
I like it.
Yeah. And about the vision question and the looking forward and AI and LLMs, I think it's. I have a mixed feeling about this in like the AI in general. I really like AI tools like for like marketing, blog post generation, or like helping you write emails and everything. I also really like them in software engineering. We use it a lot actually in the company. With data, I think it's a bit riskier to use, especially the text to SQL. I would argue that it is coming, but it's not there yet. So my usual my internal Turing test is if I ask a question from the text to SQL code tool today, and I ask the same question next week, will it give me the same answer? And the answer is often not. And the text to SQL part, I'm a bit skeptic at least. We are visioning in the product a text to Mitzu query, let's put it this way, type of feature that basically you can chat with the application, but it won't generate SQL queries, but it will generate the blocks that are currently generated systematically in the code. That's the way we'll look at like the first MVP will be like this. And down the line, maybe a few years from now, I'm visioning like in this space that there will be like product analysts, agents. So basically, you give it a task or something like that, and it will work like a product analyst, like autonomously.
Yeah, I do wonder if we've had the same experience with our internal SQL bots that they don't get consistency and they can spot where things aren't right. I do wonder if it's just the absolute sea of web development data that's and information that's out on the web that's the core of their training set, where they are so much more like adept at that, and where similar to what you're discussing there, you've got Google and OpenAI creating these agents that can go to GitHub and work through issues and do those kinds of things because it's got that corpus of underlying training data. Maybe the SQL and that kind of training data isn't there yet.
Yeah, I often run into like ChatGPT, using ChatGPT for like SQL queries. Even syntax errors are appearing quite often. So it's there. But I wouldn't trust, let's say, imagine a company going for a board meeting and showing some data to the board, and you wouldn't generate a query with the AI tool for that, that influential meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very conspicuous that Google, in Next 25 recently, we had a clipboard of very curated prompts.
Yeah. Yeah. István, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you again for your time. It's been a really interesting conversation. So yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
That's it for this week's episode of the Measure Pod. We hope you enjoyed it and picked up something useful along the way. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you don't miss future episodes.
And if you're enjoying the show, we'd really appreciate it if you left us a quick review. It really helps more people discover the pod and keeps us motivated to bring back more. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.